Greg Miller, who's going to join us and talk about it now. Greg, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, Greg, obviously this is a pretty big deal because it's been headline making the last few weeks, if not the last few months. Finally, now we have a deal between the ILWU and the PMA, or tentative agreement, we should call it. But it looks like right now there's no clear details on what happened. Can you give us a little bit of a timeline about the announcement and what this means so far?
Yeah, so negotiations began on the contract over a year ago in May. The last contract expired on July 1st, and the ILW has been working without a contract since then. Over the last 2 weeks, the talks appeared to deteriorate, reportedly over wages, and the disruptions to operations and container dwell time got worse and worse. That sort of reached ahead, and the acting labor secretary, Julie Su, came into San Francisco to meet with the parties starting on Monday this week. There was a lot of intense talks, and the deal was reached yesterday and was announced late last night. It's a tentative agreement, so it still needs to be ratified by both sides. And with the ILU, you're talking about 29 different ports, different locals. They all have supplements to agree to. So it's not done yet, but the fact that they've come out and said this, this looks like, we're definitely on the track to resolving this finally.
And Greg, it doesn't sound like there are too many details released just yet, but really this comes at a very critical timing, especially as there is a nearing peak season upon us. Do we have any idea how many ships are really en route to the West Coast that really could have made this really look like another supply chain event?
Yeah, I mean, going back to the details of the agreement, they're just not going to say those right now. That's not in their best interest to do that. But the details are obviously going to come out as the agreement goes down to be ratified. So that information will come out, just not yet. As far as the inbound traffic, the Port of LA said this week that there were 58 container ships en route to Los Angeles and Long Beach from Asia. As of now, that means they're coming across the Pacific. A month ago, it was 46, and 2 months ago, it was 47. So you can see that the volumes are picking up, which makes sense seasonally. And, if you look at the various port volumes, they are slowly, growing off the bottom versus where they were in February. So it is very important timing-wise that they got this resolved right now, because at this point, it wasn't that much of an issue. But if you add in all of the holiday goods that are coming in the next couple of months, if this hadn't been resolved, it could have been a much more significant issue.
The other really interesting timing aspect with this, of course, has to do with Julie Su and the decision for her to become interjected in the matter by heading to San Francisco, as you mentioned. As we know, last week she was up on Capitol Hill to talk a little bit about the possibility of her confirmation into actually an actual confirmed Secretary of Labor instead of just acting. This is a big item on the agenda for her, and it was a really big question for her in front of Congress as well. How important do you think that she was to the actual negotiations and the finalization of the deal? And then what does this do now for her on the other side? Obviously, it makes her look pretty good that she helped get this done.
Yeah, I mean, they would say that she's been involved all of this time. It's just that she actually flew into San Francisco. It's obviously very important politically if you think back to what happened, especially in 2021 during the supply chain crisis. This became a big negative for the Biden administration, and they were obviously very concerned about this happening again. So there's no way to know if you weren't at the table how much of a role she played. But it's safe to say that this is very good for her and for the Biden administration. The last thing they wanted in the fall was for this to sort of, go out of control here. And it's good for all the sides. If you think about it, the ILWU, it's good for the union. They have relatively good wages compared to the rest of Americans. So it would have looked bad for them to be blocking Christmas cargoes given over wages, and it's great for the terminals, the PMA, because this means that their productivity at the terminals is going to be higher during peak season, which means more throughput, which means more money. So it's good for everybody.
And we also have Sal Mercogliano now joining us for this amazing story that's just breaking this morning. Sal, thanks for joining us this morning. When we're looking at this potential deal that's being reached here, what are going to be some of the things that are top of mind as you look as this gets worked through?
Well, obviously, this agreement, which, hallelujah, we got the agreement. The white smoke came up from the meeting saying that we have an agreement, is going to have to be ratified by both sides. What I am understanding from people within the agreements and talking right now is the sticking point had been the wage freeze, but now there's a wage increase that's going to happen, looking at about $4.62 for the first year, and then about a $3.50 raise for the following years coming on. There's still an issue about COVID money, about money that's going to go retroactively back. Who does that go to? Does it go to the full union members? Does it go to the casuals that were involved? And also hearing that there was a lot of groups that were really pushing the PMA to get this agreement done. They were not crazy about Julie Su coming out. They were not crazy about the Biden administration getting involved in this, particularly Mediterranean Shipping Company under the Apontes were not really enthralled with the idea of this having to go to some sort of arbitration or some sort of ruling. So as Greg was just mentioning, it was really good that this agreement got hammered out now, and it's really the best of both worlds here for that to happen. Now we still got to wait and see what happens up in Canada with their ILWU decision.
So, Sal, I just asked Greg about the political positioning of Julie Su in this. And when we look at it now from a federal step-in standpoint, this is now the second labor negotiations in about 8 months where we've seen at least some form of federal step-in. Of course, the rail negotiations back last fall and at the start of last winter had the Presidential Review Board step in, and now we see Julie Su helping out with these negotiations here. From a political standpoint on your side of things, how does this look? Does it really set up the Biden administration as a really strong power when it comes to labor negotiations, the fact that they were able to not only get one contentious deal, but 2 contentious deals during his tenure as president?
Well, when you read the statement from the PMA and the joint statement, they really praise Julie Su. And so Julie Su had that issue during the confirmation that she was too close to the unions. Coming from California, she was way too much in bed. This is the argument a lot of Republicans were using against her confirmation. The fact that the PMA is lauding her will do a lot to get her confirmation over the hump and maybe get her confirmed to replace Marty Walsh on a permanent basis. But I think it does do a bit to really demonstrate the fact that this administration has at least a venue of looking at this and wanting to intervene. There's a question about should they have intervened sooner. There's also a question about whether or not the government intervention is what provoked the PMA and the ILWU to come to this agreement, because they did not want Taft-Hartley. When you go back and look at the previous times that this has happened, back to 2002, 2008, 2015, there were instances there where the government stepped in. 2002 is probably the biggest case where Taft-Hartley was implemented. Nobody wanted that. Nobody wanted the government coming in and really pushing that. So I do think this has a little bit of play for the Biden administration right now to sit there and put this up in the win column.
And Greg, you spoke earlier about some of the incoming traffic to the West Coast. Have we heard anything about any potential divergence to other sides of to the other side of the nation, to the East side, or to other ports overall?
Well, even the Port of LA would say that a certain portion of their traffic has already been diverted. So the diversions that occurred have really already been implemented with new supply chains put into place. I don't know to what extent just the disruptions over the last couple of weeks would have led to any additional changes. Certainly would not have led people to change their mind. So we'll see what happens with that traffic coming back if once this all gets resolved. But I think that all of the diversions that had occurred have already occurred.
So question for both of you. Greg, we'll start with you. Shipper confidence seeing this now coming forward. Obviously, as we were heading out of the second quarter and into the second half of 2023, we weren't anticipating a super huge peak season anyways, but does shipper confidence now increase seeing that this labor deal gets done? And are they less likely to maybe diversify where they're going if they're looking at sourcing goods from Asia for a peak season?
I certainly think that they must be. This will make them more confident that they're not going to have any problems getting their Christmas goods in. Because You would think that that's still to be done. Last year they obviously brought them in early. They brought them in early because of the risk of port unrest and risk of congestion. That's all over. So there's still cargo to be brought in, and I'm sure because of this, they're much more confident that they're going to be getting in on time. I mean, there's still, demand is not that high, so the volumes are not that high. So there really isn't that much in the way of problems, with the exception of the issues that we had on the West Coast over the last couple of weeks, and of course, some issues down in the Panama Canal.
Sal, your thoughts on shipper confidence now?
I think this is one of the reasons we saw a lot of shipping companies push on the PMA to get this agreement in. They wanted that confidence back. They want to take advantage of the low rates on the Trans-Pacific. They want, traffic flowing. And one of the things that we've seen is a lot of shippers have diversified where their cargo comes in, but the West Coast still has a huge amount of cargo coming in. It is still a vital component. As much as we talk about cargo diversifying to the East and Gulf Coast, let's not forget just under 50% are coming into the West Coast. So I think this is a huge win for them. And this is something that needed to be done quickly and efficiently so that this last little vestige is done. We're talking about a 6-year agreement, so we're not going to be talking about this for a little while as long as the agreement goes through.
Excellent. And thank you both so much for joining us this morning. It's great to see that there was a deal reached tentatively. Greg, starting with you, if people want to reach out to you, get more of your content, how can they do that?
Just email me, gmail@freightwaves.com. Always interested to hear from you.
And Sal, of course, we can find you on YouTube. Where's that at?
Sure. You just follow me on what's going on with shipping on YouTube.